This is the history of Cumberland Gap. There's so much time and so much history passed through this gap in the mountains that I can only touch on a small portion of it. Now, this old mountain is gap is part of Cumberland Mountain. It's just a long mountain range that runs from way up out of Virginia all the way down into Tennessee. And it's not hard to find. It's where all three states come together: Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Not hard to find at all on the map. And this place holds some secrets and national treasures of a lot of history. This mountain range is 131 miles long. And you can see it's just a solid wall. This Cumberland Mountain is impregnable. And here's just a natural gap formed in the mountains over time. Now, just to the west of Cumberland Gap, they said a meteor landed in there where Minersboro, Kentucky's at, and it probably helped form some of this gap in the mountains. But that's just a theory. Now, this old mountain and this gap, it stood for many a years, slowly developing just wilderness. And the only thing come through here as time went on was buffalo and animal traces. They just made paths here going from one feeding ground to another. It kind of looks like this. Then the Indians come in here, and when they come in here, they started using these trails too. This is called the Warrior's Path, and it was claimed by the Cherokee, but they fought over it with the Shawnee and other tribes too over time. Now, the first white man that come in here was probably some long hunters that's undocumented, just coming through the area, scouting it out and hunting. Now, the first person to ever really document the place and discover it was Dr. Thomas Walker. He was hired back in 1750 by Lowell Land Company, looking out of Virginia, to survey 800,000 acres. And he took his crew through here. That's how Powell River got its name. And you wonder how the Cumberland got its name. Dr. Thomas Walker named it after Prince William, Duke of the Cumberland in England. They named the places like Cumberland Gap, Cumberland Mountain Range, Cumberland River, and that's, if you wonder how it got the name Cumberland, that's how it got it. Now, the one that made it famous was Daniel Boone. He was a long hunter too, but he was hired in 1775. Colonel Richard Henderson. He bought land from the Cherokee. Some people said it was legit, some said it wasn't. But here's the Transylvania purchase of what he purchased at Watauga Falls, next to Elizabeth in Tennessee. And he hired Daniel Boone to blaze the trail. And he blazed this trail through here on up through there into Kentucky, called the Wilderness Road. And this was in 1775. Now, you can see this Cumberland Mountain Range here, where the little X's is. That's gaps in the mountains, but them gaps are nothing like what Cumberland Gap is. It was more passable by wagons and goods. There was Big Stone Gap, Pennington Gap. Now, they would come through here in large groups, and the reason being, when they migrated through here, through the gap and up through the Wilderness Road, is for safety. And when these little families tried to come through here by themselves, some got through, but some a lot didn't too. These Indians were always watching them. They didn't like the white man encroaching on their land. And some of them on these little groups, they would ambush them where they was weak and vulnerable. They would take advantage of it. and they would just massacre a whole family, a whole little wagon train of people. Countless souls are buried along this old road. Now these states become statehood: Kentucky in 1792, Tennessee in 1796. And the Indian problem slowly went away. But over 300,000 people passed through this gap between 1780 and 1820. That's a lot of people. Now, as this old wilderness road progressed and people moved in and settled here and settled there, it began to grow. And here in 1819, when they started the iron furnace here in the Cumberland Gap, they had found iron ore in this mountain, and they'd been working here. Now, during the Civil War, this was a really strategic place, and it changed hands 4 times. Thousands and thousands of soldiers marched through this gap during the war, but none of them was never brave enough to attack the other one because it was just so impregnable. There was a lot of skirmishes and a lot of terrain fighting, but no major engagements. And after the Civil War, this place was just really in shambles, so it slowly tried to rebuild itself. People tried to get their life back together. Here you can see the gap. They about just destroyed it, emptied it. It was slowly trying to build it back after the Civil War, year after year. Just a little post community with people traveling through and farming. Now, in the late 1880s, a guy by the name of Arthur Alexander come into the area. He represented land companies that from investors out of England, and they was looking for mineral deposits and logging and such things. So they formed the American Association. And here is some of the seams of coal they found. And they started some mining around in the area, just on the Kentucky side. And they just unlimited resource of logging in these mountains, these untouched mountains. And as time went on, this is the city of Minisboro. It was just a little community, not really a city, not even named Minisboro at the time. But he began to build, and as more people come in for jobs and stuff, the town grew real fast, from a few dozen to a few thousand real quick. And some of the town had a couple of fires, and a lot of it got burnt down, but they rebuilt. And they even started working on the road across Cumberland Mountain from the Gap over towards Minisboro. Improvements. It used to look like this, especially after the Civil War. Really nothing but just a path, rough wagon trail. They tried to make it more for more modern vehicles being developed. This is still before the automobile. And here's the town of Cumberland Gap back in the late 1800s. It was growing pretty good. Now, Arthur, he started a railroad through here, and in 1896 they started this tunnel. In 1897 it was built, all by hand. Probably about a mile long. It still stands today. Still use it. This is what it looks like in the Gap. And the old town really started growing pretty good. They got a railroad in there and a depot, and people started moving in, and the community was flourishing. Now, Arthur started other communities around the Gap, Harrogate, Arthur, Swanee, and they even got so big there, they built a Four Seasons hotel there in Harrogate. But the investors called on his loan and his note, and he couldn't pay off, so everything kind of collapsed. Now, this was tore down, and this is the present site of LMU today. Now, Cumberland Gap, it was founded finally in 1907, officially. And they built the roads better and better. This is 25E across above the gap, but 25E went down through the gap for many a year. You had to pass right through the gap. And in 1940, a Park Service was established here, Cumberland Gap National Historical Park. In 1959, Richard Nixon, he celebrated and commemorated the park 19 years after it was formed. And they saved stuff like the iron furnace, beautiful old treasure. Cudjoe's Cave, of course the park's got it now. I don't believe it's called Cudjoe's anymore, but it's a beautiful historical landmark. And here's the Sand Cave up towards the White Rocks on Cumberland Mountain. It's a beautiful sight. And they were trying to preserve back to the original Boone Trail through here. It's traced, the Wilderness Road. This is the Pinnacle Overlook. On a really, really clear day, you could see the Smoky Mountains. Here's the gap just below their feet. Here's driving into the gap nowadays. It's not changed much over the years, just got a little more modern. But this is rush hour. Used to be old sites here years ago. That's a post office now. Beautiful community. And everybody remembers the old Cudjoe's Cave here on top of 25E. It's a landmark, but it's gone now. But it was on a dangerous road. Old 25E across Cumberland Mountain. They nicknamed it Massacre Mountain. Hundreds of people lost their life on this mountain, one way or another. This old road been across this mountain since Daniel Boone cut the trail across it in 1775. But as things got so modern, vehicles got so fast, so many people dying, they decided to put a tunnel in. And they started the tunnel in 1985. And after a few delays, it was finally finished in 1996. This is looking northbound, coming from Tennessee to Kentucky. Now this tunnel is just under a mile in length. But to this day, no one has died in this tunnel yet. I'm sure they've had a few fender benders, but they keep the trucks, let them run through by themselves, especially tankers, explosive stuff. It's well ventilated. And you're on the Kentucky side. Down in the Gap, here's some sights of nowadays. There's the old mill. It's been there since the late 1880s. Here's the old train depot rebuilt, relocated in the Gap. It's an old structure, beautiful place. The old schoolhouse of the Gap. It's now the city courthouse, police station. Now this old Cumberland Gap, a lot of history's passed through here over time. Countless settlers, pioneers, soldiers, Civil War, countless history. Countless Indians before white man ever laid foot in this country. Countless buffalo back in the old days. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this bit of history I've only just touched on. It's such a wonderful place with so much history. So, I thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.